had always found comfort in the steady rhythm of my days, the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet, the gentle hum of the kettle boiling in the kitchen, the soft light filtering through the lace curtains that framed our living room window. Life, I thought for the longest time, was about these quiet moments, about doing the small things for those you love without asking for much in return. I was Evelyn Turner, mother-in-law, a role I had embraced with calm and dedication for nearly 4 decades. But lately, something was off. A shadow hung beneath the smiles I received, a coldness behind the words that seemed caring but weighed heavy on my heart. Lisa, my daughter-in-law, used to greet me with what felt like genuine warmth. Over the years, I had come to accept her as part of the family, an attentive nurse who devoted herself to her work and, ostensibly, to my son and grandchildren. Yet, those smiles no longer found their way to her eyes, and the softness of her voice had curdled into sharp edges that barely concealed her disdain. The comments masked as jokes, the sarcastic undertones, the cold silences between us, each one was a thread tightening around me, making the house feel less like home and more like a silent battlefield. I remember that afternoon vividly. The sun was dipping low, casting an amber glow across the garden, and I was sitting alone at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of cooling tea. My thoughts spiraled in a restless dance. I tried to dismiss the unease, telling myself I was being overly sensitive. After all, Lisa was always polite when others were around, always the perfect daughter-in-law to my son's friends and colleagues. Why then did her presence feel suffocating, like a quiet storm brewing just out of sight? Finally, defeated by my quiet torment, I sought out my son in the den. Mark was a kind man, shaped by duty and love, often too gentle to see the undercurrents swirling beneath the surface of his relationships. I told him about the coldness, the remarks that gnawed at my spirit, the strange behaviors I could no longer ignore. I spoke with the trembling voice of someone trying to be heard but fearing dismissal. His response was simple and crushing in its dismissal. "Mom, Lisa loves us. You're reading too much into things. She's stressed with work and the kids. You know how it is. Just try to be patient." Patience. The word felt like a double-edged sword cutting into the very fabric of my being. I nodded, swallowing the lump rising in my throat, the feeling of being unseen in my own home grinding like sandpaper against my soul. Days passed with the same silver lining of smiles that never reached the eyes, until the moment that changed everything. I was taking my pills one quiet morning, the ones prescribed after my recent doctor's visit to manage a benign heart condition, when I noticed the bottle was heavier than usual. My fingers trembled as I unscrewed the cap and saw the pills inside looked different, smaller, and oddly dull against the sunlight spilling through the window. A cold wave of disbelief and fear crashed over me. Had Lisa tampered with my medication? The thought was so terrifying, so deeply painful, that at first I refused to believe it. But then the silent pieces began to fall into place, the unexplained dizziness, the moments of confusion that I had blamed on age. A secret betrayal simmering beneath the facade of a caring nurse and devoted mother-in-law. I remembered the times she had been alone in the house when I was resting, the evenings she claimed she needed to check on errands, and the subtle restrictions she had put on my movements, as if to monitor and control. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, betrayed not just by a daughter-in-law but by the silence that my son's denial had cast over the truth. The pain was almost unbearable. It was a betrayal deeper than words, more intimate than any quarrel or argument. It felt like a slow unraveling of trust sown through years of marriage and family ties. And fear gripped me, not just for my health, but for my sanity, my place in this family that once felt like a sanctuary. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed them. I knew I had to be strong. For myself, for my son, for the family I had supported so many years with quiet love and sacrifice. That night, as I lay awake listening to the stillness of the house, a different feeling began to settle within me. Beneath the weight of shock and hurt, there was a faint ember burning, a resolve I had long kept hidden beneath layers of compliance. This was no longer about silence and endurance. Something inside me shifted, awakening a strength I had forgotten I possessed. I could not let this betrayal go unanswered, nor endure the quiet poisons of lies and greed that had crept into my home. Patience, I reminded myself. Patience had always been my greatest ally. But patience now would mean vigilance, observation, waiting for the right moment to reclaim the peace that had been stolen from me. The moment when trust turned to treachery had marked the beginning of a silent war, and I was determined to see it through, unseen but unyielding. The anger that first erupted inside me was fierce and raw, a sudden blaze of betrayal that left my hands trembling and my breath catching. I wanted to confront Lisa right then and there, to shatter the silence with a storm of words and accusations. But as I retreated into the quiet sanctuary of my room, that storm slowly calmed, replaced by a deep, resolute stillness. I knew that reacting with anger would only expose my vulnerability, and that was a weakness Lisa could exploit. I needed something far stronger and quieter. Patience, yes, but now sharpened with purpose. Keeping my resolve to myself, I buried my pain beneath a mask of calm, silent determination. I did not confide even in my son, whose unwavering trust in Lisa only isolated me further. I became a silent observer, watching, listening, framing each detail like pieces of a puzzle that I intended to solve. As I sat with my thoughts, I was flooded by memories woven over decades, memories that now felt bittersweet in the harsh light of betrayal. I recalled the pivotal choices I had made for my family, abandoning my own ambitions to raise my son, to nurture a home presided over by love and care. Those years, filled with quiet sacrifices, had slowly faded me into the background, unnoticed and unappreciated. It was as though my very existence had been replaced by an invisible shadow lurking in the corners of the house I had built with my own hands. I saw once again the countless dinners prepared by my hand, the nights spent by a feverish child's bedside, the holidays planned with anxious care to craft moments of joy. And yet, beneath that tapestry of devotion, Lisa's presence grew increasingly hostile, her initial warmth replaced by cold disdain. Her subtle manipulations were hidden beneath smiles that never quite reached her eyes, beneath words ironically coded in concern yet dripping with veiled contempt. Her passive-aggressive tactics became a language all their own, tiny cuts disguised as jokes, care carefully laced with barbs, concerns wielded like weapons. She controlled the household with quiet ruthlessness, undermining my position, isolating me within the very walls meant to protect us all. The weight of such betrayal was physical, tightening my chest and coiling cold in my stomach. I mourned not just the loss of Lisa's affection, but the unraveling of the family I thought unconditional. And yet, even as sorrow gnawed at my spirit, beneath it flickered a stubborn ember of strength. I had endured so much already, silently absorbing the hurts and slights. Now, that endurance would become my covert power. Days morphed into weeks as I honed the art of silent vigilance. I studied Lisa with the keen eye of one familiar with hidden motives. The small signs were unmistakable once I knew what to look for. The subtle impatience behind her polite smiles. The way her gaze flickered away when I approached. The deliberate control of conversation topics, shifting attention away from uncomfortable truths. Each behavior I logged carefully in my mind. Her routines became predictable. The times she left the house under the guise of quick errands, her whispered phone calls late at night, the precise moments she ensured I was alone, vulnerable, far from anyone who might question her. I began to notice how she monitored not just actions, but how energy flowed through the home, as if she was quietly steering the ship, making sure I was nothing more than a passenger, unaware and powerless. In the solitude of the evenings, when the house fell into hush, I found small refuges to nurture myself. Gardening grounds me in the living pulse of growth, reminding me that renewal was possible even after the harshest winters. Needlework became a way to soothe restless thoughts, the slow stitching a metaphor for the careful rebuilding I was beginning to imagine. I started keeping a secret journal, tucked away in my bedside drawer. There, I recorded every odd moment, every nuanced exchange that hinted at the truth beneath Lisa's polished veneer. Every discrepancy in medication bottles, every sudden change in household routines, every whispered word behind closed doors. These quiet notes became weapons. I was assembling a quiet arsenal to fight back without exposing myself prematurely. It was necessary to keep the mask on through the daylight hours. I smiled when Lisa entered the room, nodded through her restless glances, maintained the fragile illusion that all was well. My quiet demeanor calmed suspicion and bought me time. No one, not my son nor the grandchildren, could glimpse the fire smoldering inside me. That fire was fed by the hope that someday my son would see beyond the veil Lisa had woven. But until that day came, I had to bear the truth alone, the silent guardian of a secret that threatened to unravel everything I cherished. The walls that once felt like comfort now echoed with chilly tension. The house had changed, shadows lengthening, the air thick with unspoken words. But amid the coldness, I found an inner warmth, a rising strength not from confrontation but from patience born of wisdom and pain. I was no longer the woman who bowed her head in quiet suffering. Within my silence, a voice was awakening, a voice of resilience and calculated resolve that even Lisa could not silence. This was my battle to fight. Patience was armory, observation was strategy, and the truth was the weapon I would wield when the time was just right. I was ready to take back my place, to reclaim my dignity and my home, step by silent step. This was the war neither Lisa nor my son saw coming, not because I was weak, but because I was stronger than they imagined. The house had shifted under my feet, the warm sanctuary I remembered transformed into a place shadowed with tension and hidden battles. Each day, I moved silently through its rooms, like a ghost of my former self, but inside I was far from fading away. I was becoming an observer, a strategist, quietly gathering the pieces of a puzzle that, once assembled, would expose the reality Lisa had carefully concealed behind her polished smiles. I found myself watching her more closely, timing her movements, listening intently to her conversations, both in person and over the phone. I noted the nuances too subtle for most to catch. The way she frowned briefly after speaking to Mark, the nervous glances she cast when she thought no one was looking, the thinly veiled impatience in her voice when she answered my questions. Over time, patterns emerged, painting a picture far darker than the facade she presented. One afternoon, as light streamed through the kitchen window and the smell of simmering stew filled the air, I overheard a call that pierced through the illusion. Lisa's voice, usually moderated and controlled, carried a sharp edge as she spoke in hushed tones to her sister. Her words revealed a longing not just for independence but for control over the family finances, the household, and most painfully, control over Mark's affection and attention. She spoke of convincing him to uproot their lives, to move away from this house, away from me. That moment struck me like a blow. It was no longer a matter of resentment. It was a deliberate campaign to remove me, to rewrite the history I had woven into these walls. The old bonds of family, built by years of love and sacrifice, were being unraveled thread by calculated thread. I needed to fight back, but words alone would not suffice. Carefully, I began collecting proof, not just whispers and suspicions, but tangible evidence. I recorded conversations when it was safe to do so, snapping pictures of altered pill bottles, and making detailed notes about inconsistencies in Lisa's stories and their timing with my unexplained dizzy spells. Financial records showed strange transactions and withdrawals. Each piece of evidence was a brick in a fortress I intended to build around the truth. Reaching out for help was a daunting step, pride and fear intertwined, but I knew I couldn't do this alone. I turned to Joan, a trusted old friend and attorney whose wisdom I'd relied on before. Our late-night conversations became lifelines. I shared fragments of my findings cautiously. She guided me to hold back conclusions, to maintain proof and composure, for justice depended on facts, not just emotion. Meeting her in her office was like entering a haven. The scent of aging books and polished wood surrounded me as I laid out the evidence. Joan's sharp eyes scanned every photograph, recorded file, and note I passed her. Her voice was calm but certain. "You have the foundation for a strong case, Evelyn. We will proceed with caution. Timing and precision are vital." I left her office feeling both empowered and daunted. I understood this was no quick battle. It was a slow, strategic campaign, one I needed to fight with both heart and head. Back at home, I carried my mask of calm and frailty, wearing it carefully to avoid suspicion. To Lisa, I was still the compliant, elderly mother-in-law, unaware and vulnerable. But beneath that exterior, my mind was sharp and vigilant. Every conversation I had with her was an exercise in subtlety. I asked gentle questions, prompting her to reveal unintended truths, all while hiding my growing awareness. Her attempts to provoke or unsettle me barely scratched the surface of my determination. I began reclaiming small spaces in the household where Lisa had asserted dominance. I took interest in school matters for the grandchildren, casually assuming responsibility for household bills and appointments. These were small acts, but each an assertion of my continued presence and authority, a quiet counterbalance to Lisa's encroachment. One afternoon, our exchange was charged despite our polite words. Lisa's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face as she realized that I was not the fragile, oblivious woman she assumed. I could see her calculating, questioning if my calm was genuine or a mask hiding deeper resistance. These encounters steeled me. The battle wasn't just about evidence. It was psychological, a war of wills where composure could disarm as surely as facts. Throughout this turmoil, solace came from the unexpected. The laughter of the grandchildren, untainted by the family conflicts, was a balm to my soul. Their innocence reminded me of why I fought. The garden, where tender shoots broke through the soil, symbolized hope and renewal. I spent quiet moments there, nurturing plants as if nurturing my own strength. My journal swelled with pages of observations, a diary of silent warfare. Each entry chronicled suspicions, patterns, and moments of clarity. Writing was therapy and strategy. It helped me see the full scope of the deception and map paths forward. Every day was a dance of risk. One wrong word or misplaced glance could unravel the fragile web of secrecy I was weaving. I learned to read Lisa like a book, her moods, her hesitations, the way she tried to control the rhythm of the household. I adjusted my movements carefully, staying one step ahead, never revealing more than necessary. And in this careful dance, a new peace surfaced inside me. The chaos of betrayal no longer overwhelmed me. My pain remained, but my resolve was crystallized. I was not a victim cowering in a corner. I was a strategist, gathering strength through quiet defiance. Soon, the time would come to expose the truth. My evidence was solid, my strategy clear, and my allies ready. My plan was not to confront with anger or desperation, but with calm resolve as someone who had fought and endured in silence and was ready to demand justice. This was far more than a family dispute. It was the reclamation of my home, my dignity, and my life. The cage Lisa had built to trap me was falling away, brick by quiet brick, under the unyielding effort of my patience and resilience. On the edge of this turning point, I was reminded of a truth long held close. Patience is strength, not weakness. It was the sword I wielded with care, and now, prepared and steady, I was ready to turn the silent witness into an unstoppable force for justice and peace. Equipped with the knowledge I had painstakingly gathered, I began the slow and cautious execution of my plan. I understood more than ever the stakes. Every move had to be precise, delicate, and measured. I could no longer afford rashness or emotional outbursts, for they would only play into Lisa's hands and give her the upper ground she sought. I took care to conceal my growing confidence beneath a veil of frailty. My smiles remained soft, my words gentle. When Lisa was near, I showed nothing but the image of a tired mother-in-law content to fade quietly into the background, unaware of the depth of her manipulation. But inside, I was crafting a narrative that would systematically dismantle every falsehood she had built. One of the earliest acts of my strategy was to disrupt her carefully controlled environment without alerting her. I began managing small household affairs that Lisa traditionally handled alone. I made it a point to attend meetings about the children's schooling, discussing their progress and needs with teachers and advisors, subtly asserting my role not just as a grandmother but as an active part of the family's decision-making. Occasionally, during these meetings, I would gather hints and remarks that could later support my case. I also took initiative with the bills and expenses, requesting copies and cross-referencing reports with the bank statements I had secretly obtained. Misalignments and unexplained charges emerged, hinting at a hidden financial trail that Lisa had hoped to keep obscured. Every discovery intensified the knot forming in my chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and a steely determination not to be erased. To maintain the element of surprise, I took great care to work around Lisa's schedule. I learned her routines down to the hour and avoided actions when she was present or likely to notice. On days she was at work or out running errands, I would go through cupboards, sort through paperwork, or look over medical prescriptions. Each moment stolen in her absence allowed me to uncover more pieces of the puzzle. It became a delicate game of presence and absence. She believed me frail, a woman resigned to her fate. But in fact, I was the puppeteer behind the curtain, witnessing her every slight betrayal and recording it away like treasure. One afternoon stands out sharply in my memory. Lisa had gone out for what she claimed was a quick appointment. With the house silent and empty, I carefully entered her side of the bedroom, where she kept her personal documents. Hidden beneath a pile of magazines, I found a folder that detailed a plan to remove me from the will documents, altered with such precision that it was clear this was a move premeditated and cold. My hand trembled as I photographed the papers quietly with my phone. That night, I moved stealthily in shadows, organizing all the evidence into file folders. Alongside receipts, financial records, and photographs. I placed transcripts from whispered conversations I had secretly recorded. The files were growing, a testament to my resolve and meticulous observation. I also began planting subtle seeds of doubt in family conversations, speaking casually to Mark and even to the grandchildren about the importance of honesty, family loyalty, and justice. These were not accusations, but carefully crafted reminders bound to linger in the minds of those around Lisa. My voice remained steady and calm, never confrontational, never giving away the storm brewing beneath. Each interaction with Lisa became layered with meaning. When I asked a question about a missed appointment or an expense, my tone was light but precise. I watched her eyes for signs of discomfort, her voice for cracks where truth might escape. When she stumbled, as she surely did, I noted every slip with relentless patience. I made sure to arrange my days so that I was visible enough to the family, demonstrating my continued role as matriarch without seeming to challenge Lisa openly. At family dinners, I asked about budgets and services, maintaining a quiet but firm presence. It was a reclaiming of space, a declaration that I was still here and not to be ignored. Behind this visible reclamation, I was preparing the next phase, arranging a meeting with Joan, ensuring my legal path was clear and my case robust. I needed confirmation of my rights, advice on the right timing for exposure, and reassurance that the law would protect me from counterattacks. Joan's confidence gave me strength. Her expertise was the shield guarding my fragile hope for justice. Often, I imagined that moment, the turning point when I would hold the truth in my hands and reveal it to the family. I pictured Lisa's face when she would confront evidence she could no longer deny, the silence pressing down as walls closed in around her lies. But I knew such a moment required patience and precision. The wrong timing, the wrong approach, and I risked losing everything. So I continued weaving my plan carefully, wearing my mask with a poker face that concealed the flurry of strategy underneath. When Lisa tried to rattle me, as she sometimes did with sharp remarks or cold dismissals, I smiled softly. Her attempts to provoke were futile. My calm was a barrier she could not breach, a silent echo of the strength I had rekindled over months of observation and planning. On one occasion, she confronted me directly, though masked by faux politeness. Her words veiled threats and insinuations, designed to unsettle. But I met her gaze steadily, refusing to acknowledge the venom beneath the surface. That quiet defiance, I sensed, unsettled her more than any open confrontation ever could. The tension built like a pressure cooker within the walls of the house, but I stayed composed, the eye of the storm still and unshaken. Behind the scenes, I took comfort in small routines, like tending my garden. The fragile plants pushing through earth reminded me of the growth possible even after seasons of hardship. In those moments of peace, I restored my spirit for the battles yet to come. The grandchildren, blissfully unaware of the adult conflicts, were a source of light too. Their innocence and laughter fueled my resolve to restore the family's fractured peace, not with anger or retribution, but with the quiet justice I sought. As weeks flowed into months, the web around Lisa tightened. The evidence was no longer scattered fragments, but a coherent narrative impossible to ignore. I could feel the walls closing in on her carefully maintained illusion. Soon, the moment would come to set things right. I was no longer a timid figure in the background. I was a force of quiet determination, a mother-in-law transformed by betrayal but not broken by it. I was ready to move from silent witness to active vindicator, armed with the truth and the patience to wield it wisely. This was my testament. Strength need not roar to be heard. Underneath quiet patience lies a power capable of shattering the darkest secrets and reclaiming the life and dignity stolen by treachery. The evening settled over the house with a calm that belied the storm beneath the surface. Lisa returned as usual, stepping through the door with that familiar, forced smile she wore like armor. The mask was still there, carefully constructed, yet I could see the faint cracks beginning to show, the slight hesitation in her step, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She believed she held the reins, that I was still the fragile woman she could easily overshadow. She was wrong. I waited until the children were safely tucked into bed, their laughter tucked away in distant rooms, and Mark long absorbed by his work in the study. It was the moment I had long prepared for, a quiet, deliberate confrontation, where truth would weigh heavier than any denial. "Lisa," I said softly, gesturing toward the living room, "please, sit with me." She obeyed, her posture stiff, still defiant beneath the mask. The room was dim, bathed in the gentle glow of a single lamp, soft shadows folding around us. It was a setting meant to soothe, but I knew the gravity of what was to come would shatter any pretense of peace. I began by reminding her of the fragile thread that holds a family together: trust. How it is built on honesty, nurtured with care, and how once broken, it casts long shadows. My voice was even, a calm that contrasted with the storm of emotions beneath my words. Then I laid out the evidence, carefully curated, irrefutable. Photographs of the altered medications, moments caught on tape where her hatred slipped into whispers, trails of financial discrepancies that could no longer be hidden. I spoke of the secret plans to erase me from the family's future, plans she had confided in hushed tones, thinking herself safe. Each piece was a nail in the fragile outside she had worn so confidently. I watched as her eyes darted from me to the mounting proof, the fight draining from her face as panic took hold. The confident woman who laced every word with poison began to crumble, the facade unraveling thread by thread. She tried to speak, stumbling over protests and feeble justifications, but the weight of truth pressed heavily in the room. There was no room left for lies or excuses. She was exposed, vulnerable, and powerless against the strength of evidence and the quiet resolve she had underestimated. I told her this was not a battle of vengeance. It was a call for justice to protect what was left of a family fractured by deceit, to restore the respect and safety that had been stolen through years of subtle manipulation. I urged her to accept the consequences, to face the reality she could no longer deny. The surrender came slowly, an averted gaze, a hand trembling on the edge of the couch, silence choking the space between us. The woman who had ruled with quiet malice was gone, replaced by someone stripped bare in the harsh light of truth. I did not revel in her defeat. My victory was the reclamation of my dignity and my rightful place within this family. This confrontation was not the end, but a turning point, a release of long-held tension. Reaching for my teacup, I let the warmth steady me. The silence stretched, not as a weapon, but as a space to breathe and absorb the shift unfolding between us. Outside, night enveloped the house in darkness, yet inside me, a glimmer of hope stirred, a fragile but radiant spark born from justice finally spoken aloud. I knew forgiveness would take time, some wounds cut too deep for immediate healing. Yet, justice was a powerful first step, a foundation for what might eventually become peace. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house shifted subtly. The heavy tension that once clung to every corner began to dissipate like morning mist. Lisa's presence was subdued, her confident demeanor replaced by quiet caution and retreat. Mark, caught in the painful middle, slowly began to seek clarity. Our conversations, once strained and sparse, edged toward openness. He started to acknowledge the fractures, the lies, the silent pain he had failed to see. Brick by brick, tentative bridges of understanding formed. Though the road ahead was uncertain, I no longer bore the invisible weight of doubt and isolation. I reclaimed my position with quiet strength and authority born of patience, truth, and unwavering resolve. The home I had built with years of love and sacrifice was scarred but still standing. The voice of the silent witness, the one who observed, endured, and waited, had finally spoken. In that voice was power, the power to heal, restore, and move forward. In that moment, I understood that peace is not found in silence alone, but in the courage to reveal truth when the time is right. And so I stood, steadied by experience and strength, ready to embrace the future whichever it held with calm assurance and unbroken dignity. The day Lisa left, an unexpected stillness settled over the house, a calm so profound it almost startled me. The rooms that once echoed with tension were now filled with a quiet that felt both foreign and strangely comforting. The absence of her presence was a relief I had long yearned for but hardly dared to imagine. At last, I could breathe without the heaviness of suspicion pressing on my chest, without the constant need to be alert for the smallest sign of betrayal. I found myself lingering by the window, watching the sunlight spill generously across the garden. The flowers and tender shoots, resilient and thriving despite all the hardships I had tended them through, seemed to mirror the renewal I felt stirring within my own soul. The garden had been a silent witness to both my pain and my strength, a place where life continually broke through even the most unforgiving soil. As I traced the familiar paths between beds of blooming roses and newly sprouting herbs, I reflected on the long journey that had led me here. The years marked by quiet endurance and invisible wounds now shone with a strange dignity. I had learned to listen to the whispers of intuition, to the silent truths beneath everyday interactions, and finally, to my own inner voice that demanded to be heard. The pain of betrayal still lingered like a shadow, but it no longer defined me. Instead, I clung to the strength that had emerged from it, a hard-won resilience born of both love and loss. I had reclaimed my place in this family and, more importantly, reclaimed myself. The grandchildren, with their boundless energy and innocent laughter, continued to fill the house with light. Their joyous presence was a balm to my spirit, a reminder of the pure love that existed apart from the complexities of adult conflict. Watching them play, I felt a renewed commitment to preserve the peace they deserved, to nurture a home where their laughter could ring free and untarnished. My relationship with Mark grew cautiously, yet with hope. The walls built of misunderstanding and denial began to crumble as we shared conversations once too difficult to face. He began to see the fractures his blindness had inflicted, not just in the family's dynamic but in the trust we had built over decades. Slowly, our dialogue deepened, tentative but genuine, laying the groundwork for healing. The house, battered though still standing, felt more like home again with each passing day. I walked through familiar rooms with a sense of quiet dignity, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice and love settle into a new balance. The voice I had kept silent for so long now resonated with quiet authority, a testament to the power of endurance and the courage to reclaim one's life. In moments of solitude, I often returned to the garden, finding solace among the blooms and the earth. Each plant's growth mirrored my own recovery, a daily reminder that resilience could flourish even after the harshest seasons. The simple act of tending the soil became a ritual of healing, grounding me in the present while nurturing hope for what was yet to come. The silence filling the house was no longer oppressive but restorative. I embraced it without fear, allowing myself to listen deeply to my own heartbeat, to the shifting rhythms of family life, to the promises of renewal whispered by the gentle breeze. While wounds still required time to heal and trust needed rebuilding, I was ready for the challenges ahead. The journey would not be easy, but it was one I would face with open eyes and a steadfast heart. I had discovered that silence, once a burden that weighed heavily upon me, could be transformed into a wellspring of power when wielded patiently and with intention. Freedom came not from loud defiance but from the quiet strength that insisted on truth and justice. As dawn broke each day, I stepped forward carrying the knowledge that I was no longer defined by betrayal or sorrow. I was a woman renewed, shaped by experience and fortified by grace, ready to live fully and freely. In the silence, I had found my greatest strength, and with it, my freedom.